Whoa, 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 settle down, it's Dailytekk time. Today's video is sponsored by Paperlike, which makes writing or drawing with any Apple Pencil on any iPad feel more like paper. Hey, it's Chris, and today we're gonna be talking about iPadOS and how it's changed everything for me when it comes to using an iPad. So we're gonna be talking about settings, and we're gonna be talking about my workflow, which is gonna end up giving you some tips on how you can best utilize iPadOS in a very practical way. Oh, also, I should mention, there's gonna be a Q&A at the end of the video because I asked you guys on Twitter and on YouTube in the community tab for all your iPadOS questions, and you had some good ones. And by the way, the After Party, the weekly podcast, is now available on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, all over the place. I mean, there's an audio version, there's a video version, we've broken all the segments up into clips. There's so many ways to consume it. I just don't want you guys to miss out. So check out the link so all the technicians can be a part of this community. The iPad experience starts with the home screen. It's the first thing that you see whenever you power on the device. So new in iPadOS, there's a setting that will let you choose to see more app icons on your home screen, and that's something that I turned on because I definitely want to be able to see all of my pro apps on the screen at once, as many as I can without having to scroll. Just think about, like before, all the wasted space in between your app rows and columns. Now you can shrink that down. It's much more usable. So to change this, you want to hop into the Settings app, Display and Brightness, and then Home Screen Settings. The reason this is cool for me, the reason it changed things for the better, is because I really don't like having to use folders unless I absolutely have to. So just not having to swipe, having more in front of me is time-saving. I like it. Also new in iPadOS is pinned widgets. And let me tell you right now, of course, number one, I'm taking advantage of this, but when you turn this on, if you turn it on, do not leave it at the default settings. You have to customize this with the apps that you have available and that you use to get more out of this experience. There's a massive difference between using an iPad with iPadOS and using one with pinned widgets that's custom tailored to your workflow. So up at the top of my pinned widgets, I've got Apple Reminders because I like that better than the default Today view that combines the calendar and the reminders. And then I've also got Siri Shortcuts. Now just this, having pinned widgets, having Siri Shortcuts there, and having my favorite shortcuts there that are optimized for my iPad experience specifically has been a game changer. And I actually went through and redid my shortcuts just to be better suited for iPadOS. So for instance, when I sit down and it's time to get to work, it's just one tap, one button to instantly connect either my AirPods or my Beats headphones, depending on whether or not I want some noise cancellation or whatever. Just right there, it saves me from going into the Settings app and Bluetooth and connecting that way, or having to mess with the control center and doing whatever with the long presses and taps on the Bluetooth stuff. Way better. And then I also have some shortcuts set up for like Apple Music playlists or motivational videos that I like to use before it's time to film or whatever. I'm gonna talk more about voice control, which is a new accessibility feature that I think actually everybody is gonna be able to get a lot out of. I'm gonna talk about that more at the end of the video, towards the end. But really quick, just let me mention, I set up a turn on voice control and turn off voice control button in my Siri Shortcuts there in the widget, which is pretty cool. So after I've sat down, opened up the iPad, connected to my favorite headphones with one tap, and have started up my favorite work playlist, the next thing that has been super impactful on my workflow is the ability to show the same app in multiple spaces and or side by side. If you're a technician, if you've been subscribed to this channel for the last couple of years, you know that I've been asking Apple to let me have 2 instances of Apple Notes on the screen on the iPad side by side since forever. And now it's finally possible. Why did I want that? Why do I like it? It's very simple. I've always wanted to be able to reference one note while typing and editing another. And Apple Notes happens to be one of my workhorse apps, and you might substitute that with whatever your workhorse Notes app is, whether that's Notability or Bear or whatever. But aside from having 2 different notes open side by side, I might have a separate workspace where I've got notes on one side and Instapaper on the other when I'm doing some reading or research for one of these videos. Or I might have Safari open in another third workspace with notes on the other side, or even just notes all by itself too. So what I'm basically doing, now that you can have the same app open in multiple spaces, is creating different workspaces for myself based on the project or activity that I'm working on at that time and space. Time and space, getting all Einstein on you. But what I'm saying is, like, if I'm writing, that's one workspace and notes is there. Or if I'm researching, that's a different workspace and notes is there too, paired with something else. Whether I'm photo editing or whatever it is, I can have the same app open all over. It's really a game changer. Now for me, for instance, with all those different notes open all over the place and paired with different apps, it can get a little bit crazy trying to find what it is that you're after and what workspace you want to get busy in. So fortunately, there's now App Expose. And if I long press on the notes icon, for instance, and this could work with other apps too, then you can say show all windows and it will show you everywhere that you have that app open, which is amazing. So now all of a sudden, instead of being static and just stuck in one mindset, I'm popping all over the place. I'm in this window, I'm in that window, and I'm seamlessly switching in and out of these different phases of my workflow, and I'm just getting more done. I'm being more productive. Now, personally, I still wish that I could see 3 or 4 different apps on the screen at once. Even if they were just like iPhone-sized, thin, tall columns. I would like that. I realize not everybody would, based on comments that I've got before. But since I can't have that, the next best thing is to have Apple's newly recharged and enhanced slide over feature, which lets you slide over a window to have 3 things on your workspace at once. But instead of just having that one extra thing, that third thing, you can now flick up and load that thing up with a bunch of different apps. So in here, I've been stashing things like music, mail, messages, Overcast, Safari, another Safari window, basically just a bunch of stuff that I know I'm gonna wanna access no matter what screen I'm on without having to get out, go to the home page, the home screen, and then reload it. Now what's really cool here is, let's say you've got 2 apps open side by side and you slide in that slide over window, which is loaded up with a bunch of things, and you see there's a bar on the bottom of that and on the bottom of your main screen. So you got 2 bars, kind of like the home bar on the bottom of your iPhone. Well, you can swipe left or right to switch around on either of those bars, which means you can mix and match whatever it is that you're looking at through your workspaces, which is pretty cool. Now, getting the most out of the iPad experience really has a lot to do with learning how to drag and drop, and what you can drag and what you can drop, and just understanding that whole workflow, which is kind of hard for a lot of people, I think, switching from like a mouse-centric setup. And yes, I know you can use a mouse. Go check out my iPad setup. That's the ultimate setup that uses a mouse. I got a whole video on that. But there's a new feature in iPadOS that I don't think is gonna get a whole lot of coverage that has made dragging and dropping a lot faster, a lot easier, a lot more powerful for me. And it's this: if you are in Mail or Notes or Files and you need to select a bunch of things that are in the same list, you can take 2 fingers and swipe down on those things and quickly select them all. And then you can take another finger and drag over, and they will all be in a pile that you can then place wherever you want. So 2 finger swipe down and grab a bunch of files in one app and drag them over into Mail to mail them, for instance. Or 2 finger swipe to grab a bunch of notes and organize them into a folder, for instance. There's one feature that has to do with the Apple Pencil that has me very, very happy, and it has to do with screenshots. Not just taking them, but marking them up and sharing them. So if you take your Apple Pencil and kind of swipe in vertically or up from either of the bottom corners, you're gonna take a quick screenshot. So if you're in Safari or a PDF or an email, for instance, you're gonna have the option to not just take a screenshot of what's on the screen itself, but to grab the full page. So if you're on a really long website, especially, this is very useful. You don't have to just grab a little section. You can grab that whole entire page and then use the Apple Pencil to highlight it, to draw on it, make some notes, do whatever you need to, put a little doodle in before sharing it with somebody or saving it. Like something I do all the time, just for these videos here on this channel, is take a screenshot of something. And so now to be able to do that really quick, mark it up, airdrop it over to my Mac, and stick it in a video. It all happens just like this, and it's smooth as butter, and that is why I love the Apple ecosystem. Now, the Files app became a lot more useful and powerful in iPadOS. I'm not gonna hit every feature. I just wanna talk about one thing that has made a big difference for me as a power user, trying to get the most out of my iPad. And that is the new 3-column view. And not just that, but the fact that it has quick actions. So now let's say that I need to find a photo. And so I'm going through the columns, kind of like on the Mac. It feels a little bit more Mac-like now. And 1 column, 2 column, 3 column, I find the photo, and then I get, number one, a high-res preview of it right there, which is amazing. But I can also, just there in the Files app, kind of like Finder on the Mac, I can rotate it, or I can make some quick edits on it. I can mark it up, I can compress it, all without actually opening another app. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about time savings. Time savings. Who doesn't want that? When I think back, just a short jaunt to the days when there was no iPadOS, and there was the old Safari that wasn't desktop class, I think about not being able to edit my SquareSpace site. I know SquareSpace sponsors a bunch of stuff all over the internet, and they've sponsored some stuff on this channel. This is not sponsored, but I do actually use Squarespace, and I couldn't edit my Squarespace stuff on my iPad before. It was a huge pain. It was one of the things that kept me tethered to my Mac, and it was one of the things in the back of my head. It's a small thing, but it's an important thing. It's not something that I used every day, but that I couldn't go without, if that makes sense. Like, I can go into a site that features a bunch of products, for instance, like myslicedapple.com, the site we made to feature Apple products, Apple accessories, and actually change it, which I know is something I need to do. Everybody keeps begging me, will you please update that site? I love it. I know I just only have so many hours in the day, but I can edit it now. Something else that's kind of a small thing, but a cool thing, and something that is actually useful for someone like me, is the ability to now tap and hold on a tab and say, arrange all my tabs by website. Arrange by title, I have no idea why that would be useful, honestly. But arrange by website, yes. So if I'm creating a video and it's on the iPhone 11 or 12, let's say for next year, 12, and I've got like 20 different tabs open from 7 different sites, and maybe I want to go through each site rather than just each tab, but it's all in this crazy order, whatever, long press on a tab and organize tabs by site. Brilliant. Now, just before we get into the Q&A here, I do want to mention the new voice control feature that's landed in iPadOS. It's an accessibility feature, technically, but I think a lot of people, most people, could actually learn to get a lot out of this. It's meant to let you control absolutely everything on an iPad without having to touch it. So, do you know who Gary Vee is? If you don't, I guess shame on you, and I'm not going to tell you about it. You can look him up. He's all over the place. But I remember him saying that he doesn't type articles. He actually records an article. He like voices it, records it, and somebody else goes through and basically turns it into an article. Well, this is as close as I can come to something like that, right? Without hiring somebody. Like, the voice control features are so powerful for editing text that, and this is why I set up a shortcut to turn this on and turn it off when it's time to write up a script or something. And I actually wrote this video, the notes for this video, using voice control in Apple Notes. It's just something that I think you should play around with. The new mini swipeable keyboard that you get by pinching on the big keyboard, which gives you a tiny little mini keyboard that you can move over to the sides, you can swipe around with your thumb, is very similar to what you have on the iPhone now with iOS 13. I didn't like that the first time I tried it, but I actually use it all the time now. So when I just pick up my iPad and I don't want to use the actual keyboard and I'm surfing around or something, that has been super useful. All right, and then at the end of the day, dark mode pops on, a little bit easier on the eyes, night mode comes on, do not disturb, go to bed, wake up, and the whole thing starts all over again, and I look forward to it because of iPadOS. I like it that much. If you own an iPad or you're looking to get one soon, then check out today's sponsor, Paperlike, which is an accessory that makes it feel and sound more like using real paper when you're working with an Apple Pencil. Paperlike actually gives you more control when you're writing or drawing thanks to the paper-like resistance that it offers. And yeah, it really makes a big difference. Plus, it reduces glare and fingerprints, which who wouldn't want that? Paperlike is great for anyone who wants to use apps like Apple Notes or Notability or Procreate or Affinity Photo, among many others. Not to mention the new sidecar feature coming to macOS Catalina. When you place an order, you'll get 2 Paperlike covers plus application accessories, along with free worldwide shipping and a 100% satisfaction guarantee. Go ahead and order yourself a Paperlike using that link down in the description. All right, let's get into the Q&A section. Now look, you guys asked a ton of questions on Twitter and YouTube. I can't get to them all, so I'm gonna have to just pick and choose some that I feel like I can add some value to. Question number 1, do I think Apple will release fully featured Final Cut Pro or Logic Pro for the iPad? I am very hopeful that Apple is going to release Final Cut Pro. As a video person, I desperately want that for the iPad. And Logic Pro, I think people are out there who do audio stuff, music stuff, who absolutely want that to come to the iPad Pro. Here's the thing, Pro doesn't just refer to hardware. Pro also and absolutely includes Pro apps, Pro software. And it's hard to have one without the other. A lot of people on the iPad Pro right now can't even use all that power. It's such a powerful thing, there's not a lot of apps that really fully utilize it. And video editing in particular would be one place where you could actually put all that power to good use. Like for Final Cut Pro, there's things that are missing in the next best thing, which is LumaFusion. There's no optical flow or that kind of powerful retiming, for instance. And there's no basic stabilization, which is hard to imagine. I mean, going without if you're doing serious video work. I hope, and I think that this is something Apple could be working on and should be working on because it makes a lot of sense. After this update, is there any reason to own a Mac? I think really it just comes down to personal preference still at this point, but I will say this, aside from software, because software makes all the difference right now, and there's some things where iPad has way more software in a certain category, although with Mac Catalyst, that's gonna let developers bring their iPad apps over to the Mac platform, which was very needed. I mean, that's gonna change a little bit, but there's certain pro apps over on the Mac where you still just aren't gonna get that experience on the iPad. But also, the ability to do something like have a super ultra wide screen, which I just got recently, for instance, it's just one example, hooked up to my Mac and have all that extra space is so good for my productivity. Now there's something about having just an iPad, setting up a single nice compact iPad with a keyboard on your desk, so minimal, so powerful, you can get a lot done. I like that setup a lot. But there's also something to be said about being able to have like 2 27-inch monitors or a super ultra wide and just being able to have so much more available to you all at once without having to tab around or like, you know, expose and find whatever buried under a bunch of windows. From a productivity standpoint, there are power users or people who are gonna prefer all that extra screen real estate, I think. That's just one example. Are there still glitches? I have a few apps drop and the small keyboard that you can pinch glitches a good amount on my Pro. I know that exact glitch that you're talking about. It happened to me once and I had to like restart or do something to get rid of it. There are some glitches still. I know that they just came out with a new update. So hopefully, you know, those updates are gonna come very frequently, get all these things smoothed out. But yeah, if you like don't wanna mess around with some bugs, then you could just wait a couple weeks and you'll probably be good. But if you're an early adopter at the same time, the bugs and the glitches, they haven't been enough to dissuade me from using iPadOS so far. Do I use a mouse, and if so, which one? The only mouse that I've tried with iPadOS so far is a Satechi mouse. Satechi, I don't know how to say it. But I made a whole video on that, so instead of talking all about it, I'm just gonna link it up here, and you can go check it out. What's one iPadOS feature I didn't enjoy as much as I hoped? And what's one feature I hope to see in the next update that wasn't in this one? One thing that we got that I felt was a little bit disappointing because it wasn't quite as robust as that I wish it would have been is external drive support. So on the iPad Pro, I can plug in some USB-C accessories. I can plug in certain drives. And the problem with that is, let's say I want to edit a video and I have some footage and I import that onto an external drive or whatever. And I want to import that into LumaFusion or whatever to actually use it. Something as basic as a status for how much of that file has copied is not there yet. And so you're kind of sitting there like wondering, how long is this gonna take? There's little refinements that just need to happen. It's so close to being amazing, that feature, but it's not 100% of the way there to where it needs to be. So that's something that I'm a little bit disappointed with. I wish that there was Sidecar for your iPhone or for another iPad, because I know there's other people out there who have like old iPads laying around, or who would like just a little bit of extra space to use their iPad with like their iPhone over here and use those together. Some more cross compatibility between my Apple devices would be great. Or like Sidecar with your Mac between two different iPads. I would love that too. Are there any features missing that I wish were still there, especially in terms of being a laptop replacement? Now, this is a trick question, kind of, because a lot of people just want you to say like, I wish the iPad was the Mac, but that's not what it is. It's meant to be a different device. Apple has said we're not combining those. So there's people who haven't like bought into the iPad idea yet, even with iPadOS and all the extra firepower that you get with the iPad Pros, because it's not a Mac. Well, that's cool, because they can have the Mac. The one thing for me, I mean, I feel like I could basically do everything aside from if I have Final Cut Pro, which I've already talked about a lot. I could basically do everything, and better external drive, which I also just talked about. I could basically do everything on my iPad. I could do it. But one thing I would really miss about the Mac is the option to have more screen real estate when hooked up to an external display. A more robust external display support would be great, and yet not necessary. I don't need that. It's not like a must-have if I had to switch over from the Mac to the iPad. Like, as a general rule of thumb, if you're looking at buying one of these and you don't know if you should or not, if you're doing light computing stuff, and maybe anything except for a spreadsheet, I know a lot of people have some issues with spreadsheet stuff. I'm not really into that, so I can't really tell you how well that works, even with the desktop class Safari. But if you're doing light office stuff, email, web surfing, typing, then you're going to be fine. And I guess I will tack onto that. I think mouse support is cool. I did make that video about using the ultimate like desktop kind of iPad setup with a mouse. And I think that mouse support is cool, but I don't like that cursor that they gave it. I know they kind of hampered it on purpose under the guise of being an accessibility feature, but really they kind of want to test the water, see if people took to that mouse support, but it bugs me kind of having that big circle cursor. If they refined that and like made it a real actual feature, I would enjoy that too, I think. We've been told that keyboard shortcuts are better. Can we get some clarity as to what that means and what's the value? I think a lot of what that means has to do with Safari. In fact, I think the majority of what I've seen are new keyboard shortcuts for Safari. And that's part of that extra desktop class, Safari, that you've been hearing about. It just makes things a little bit easier. You have that muscle memory that you built up from using Safari on your Mac, and it just does so much more without you having to reach up and actually tap on the screen. So as far as I'm concerned, that's where most of those keyboard shortcuts actually come in. And if you're ever wondering what keyboard shortcuts there are for whatever app, most people probably know this already, but you can just hold down the command key if you have an external keyboard connected, and it will show you all the keyboard shortcuts for whatever app you're in. What about iPadOS on the Mini? What do I think about that? Now, I actually made a video kind of like talking about this, and I compared the iPad Mini to the iPad Pro, actually, with the beta of iPadOS, because it's that powerful. It does so much. And I'm a fan of iPadOS on whatever iPad it's on, including the Mini. The only thing with the Mini is with that limited screen real estate, your split screen is going to be a little bit smaller, obviously, quite a bit. But I found that to be actually pretty useful. It's kind of like having two phones side by side. You can still see information in each. It's not quite that dramatic, but it's not pointless. Like if you hook up a keyboard to an iPad Mini, go watch the video. I'll link it up here if I remember. If I don't, remind me. Or just search Dailytekk iPad Mini. But if you hook up an external keyboard and you got iPadOS running on your Mini, you can get some real work done. And that's no joke. Do I think iPadOS would be more functional as a computer system if there was a docking station designed for it? So there are some hubs that you can plug in to like your USB-C port on an iPad Pro. And here's the answer. I would just like to see more USB-C ports come to the iPad Pro, at least. At least two, at least. Because when you plug in a hub, then you still only end up with one usable, functional, external USB-C. So 2 USB-Cs would be amazing. 3, I don't know. 4 is probably really pushing it anytime in the near future. But that, above all else, I think would go a very long way towards making the iPad just more usable for power users. Any idea why the swipe keyboard isn't on iPadOS? Actually, it is, but it's not on the big keyboard. It's only on the mini keyboard. So if you pinch together on the big keyboard, the digital keyboard, it'll minimize itself and you can move it around and use your thumb or whatever to swipe around on it. I've actually found that very useful, but I have found myself, now that I've been using iOS 13 on my phone, trying to swipe around on that big keyboard. And I don't know why they didn't include that there, because actually some people do want to use that. I naturally find myself trying to swipe around on that big digital keyboard. Hopefully it's something that they update, because I personally would use it. Am I working on an 11 or 12.9 inch iPad? You notice that I had the Pro then. Actually, I have one of every model, only because I'm a tech reviewer. If I didn't, it's not like a flex. It's just, that's my job, so I have that. But my personal iPad that I actually use the most is the iPad Pro 11 inch. And I'm telling you this, that has been perfect for me since it came out. I love it. I've been on this kick of like trying to have the most powerful things in the smallest form factor that I can for when I'm mobile, when I'm traveling. And that's worked out really good for me. I have no complaints with the iPad 11, but I am thinking about upgrading to the bigger version, 12.9 or whatever it happens to be when the next iPad Pro comes out, for one reason: Sidecar. I love Sidecar. I've been using it with my Mac, and I've been using it with Final Cut Pro with the dual screen function so that my preview shows up down on the iPad. I love that. So a little bit more screen real estate. So I love it so much that I would actually consider getting a bigger iPad just for the Sidecar feature, because I use it so much when I'm in the office. And then it's still portable. I had an older one that was the bigger size, and you can still take it around or whatever. So I don't know. Happy with the 11, thinking about the 12. iPad 2019 versus iPad mini 2019. Basically the A10 versus the A12 Bionic, not the Pro. How would that work for a kid sticking with online magazines, newspapers, some artistic expression like art on the go? To be very honest, I think the power is not really an issue for the things that you brought up, whether it's reading or even doing some typing like schoolwork or art using an Apple Pencil. I don't think that the processor is going to slow you down on either of those, quite honestly. Now, when you said art, the thing that popped into my head is you might want that bigger screen for doing some art stuff. You can do it, and I've covered this before on the iPad mini. Check out the video right here again. You can do stuff using the pencil on the mini, and it's fine. It works. It's cool. But if you're doing art, you might want a bigger canvas, potentially. That said, though, I really enjoy, if you're talking about newspapers and magazines and reading, like Apple News Plus, for instance, nothing beats the mini for me for a reading experience. I love reading with that because it's so light. So I don't know. I probably didn't make this decision any easier for you, but hopefully that's somewhat helpful. All right, that's gonna do it for this video. Hopefully you have enjoyed it. Let me know if you have any other questions down in the description. Try to answer those, or the community can kick in and get those answered for you as well. And you know what? There's so many videos you could be watching on YouTube. Like, thank you for clicking on this one. Thank you for watching if you watched all the way through to this one. I would love to have you check out some of the other videos on the channel if you're new around here. And really, check out the podcast. It's the Dailytekk After Party. It's on Apple Podcasts. It's on Spotify. We submitted it to Google because people were requesting that, even though we talk about Apple so much. No hate towards Google. Google's supposed to send me the new Pixel 4. We'll see if it actually arrives. But yeah, check it out. Become a part of that part of this community. And you know what? Find us on Instagram. We're at Dailytekk, spelled Daily Tekk there. We're on Twitter. In fact, a bunch of these questions came from Twitter. So if you want to participate more, make sure you subscribe, because I ask the community here on YouTube a lot of questions, and also over on Twitter. But it's at Dailytekk, spelled Daily Tekk, all over the place. I'll catch you in the next video. Later.